Hello, Dr. Royer.
Let's see, 1 second. Steph, can you hear me? You can hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, good. Hey, Adi, how you doing?
I'm good, Doc. How are you?
Good, good. We got all kinds of people coming in. Good group tonight. Look at this group. Wow, the All-Stars are coming out tonight. Good to see everybody.
We all want to be with a superstar. What can we say?
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. Well, it's good to have you guys on. We're gonna have a good time tonight. We got a lot of different things to talk through, and hope you guys are ready for a little bit of interaction because I do want to ask some different questions. If you don't like to speak up, that's fine. We'll use this chat window down here. So if you look at the bottom of your Zoom, there's a little chat. And if you open that up, you can type in a message, okay? So my first question for you guys is, how would you describe the heart? The heart is like sometimes we talk about the heart. The heart is like a what? What is it, kind of, it beats like something, or it's like a, what would you just give me? There's no right or wrong answer. Just let me see what you say. The heart, right here, okay?
Do you know anybody that lives without one?
I don't. Well, you might not have one, but that's okay.
Mine comes in useful about every millisecond of the day.
Yes, super important. But our heart is what? Like, what would you compare it to? It's
Our engine.
heart is like a what? Like it's a,
The engine that keeps us running.
okay, an engine. Okay, we compare it to an engine.
Do we get stars after this? Do you rate us on our responses?
We can add those to the to your star count.
Okay.
It's like an engine. What would you say, like when people talk about the beating of the heart? The heart beats like what? It's a, what do you think of when you think of the heartbeat? The heartbeat. Somebody said a muscle. Yes, the heart is a muscle, definitely. And that's like a drum. It beats like a drum. How about when you talk about the rhythm of the beat? What do we typically talk about that? So a drum, let's get a couple other things. Muscle, drum, engine. What else do you think of when you think of the heart?
Consistency.
Consistent. It's very consistent. It's you know, it's always there, right? And it's always beating. Have you ever heard of somebody say it's like a clock? You know, it beats like a clock, you know, or like a metronome, you know, it beats, it has kind of this consistency to it, right? And we have these different ways that we describe the heart that are helpful, but sometimes they kind of simplify something that is really, really profound in how the heart is extremely interactive. Maybe an engine isn't, yeah, Claudia said rhythmic. Okay, yes, it's very rhythmic. It has a rhythm to it, right? And but it's also with this rhythm, it's in a constant dance with the environment, isn't it? Like it doesn't, sometimes like a metronome and a clock is a real misnomer on the heart because you just think beat, 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 beat. But it isn't really like that. It has to have the beats, but it's very interactive. It's changing its beats all the time based on what I need physiologically and what the environment is demanding from me. Give me an example of something in the environment that may make my heart beat faster. Give me a couple examples. Something in the environment in the chat, type for me. I definitely should be hearing from some staff that are listening in too. A fire, yes, okay. If an alarm goes off almost before I can even, not almost, literally before I can mentally process, which usually it takes those neurons maybe 180 miles an hour. We're responding to the stress, the alarm, the lion, the fire before we even can, mentally process it. Our heart has already got us 2 steps ahead in activating my body through it beating faster and getting ready to pump more blood, right? What are some situations that the heartbeat might slow down? What are some things that may cause it to, in a good way, where it's not beating fast like the lion or the alarm or the stress? What's a time that it might slow down? Meditation, okay? So when I meditate, so there's things that I literally can do, good and bad, that either speed it up or even slow it down. Is there anything else where the heart might slow down besides just
Sleep.
sleeping? If you watch your heart rate through a monitor that you wear, like a Fitbit or something like that, you'll notice, some really low heart rates, right? And you can even train your heart, which is really crazy. Like, I can teach my heart how to beat slower. Um, Sometimes we inadvertently teach our heart how to beat faster through being stressed chronically, but our heart adapts to different things that we expose it to. So it's very important as we talk through this that we understand that the heart is this very interactive device that's constantly changing. It's not really like a clock. We don't want it to be like a clock. We don't want it on the second hand to be beating because that means low variability, which we're going to discuss. We don't want it to be like a metronome. Mm-mm. We want it to interact. And in that interaction is where we develop resilience, is how the heart can interact with the environment. So let's pull up a couple things. Great job to start off. I will ask you more questions as we go through. But I want to pull up an article from a study that we did a few years back. Oh, give me 1 second. I had it up, but so a number of years back, we took about 300 people. And if you've read Tsunami, you would know about this because it's chapter 4. Speaking of which, if you would like to get Tsunami, a copy of it, please just type in the chat, or somebody that would benefit from it. Let us know, and Stephanie will work on getting a copy out to you. But this,
Great. So we shouldn't ask you. We should ask Stephanie because I've been waiting for my signed copy forever. I told you I pay you triple the retail price, and I still haven't got one. So Stephanie, can you provide me a copy, please, with your signature? Forget Dr. Royo's signature.
Who is this guy? How did he get a link to our site?
Hey, I just heard about you a week ago. This is fun.
You are funny. Adi has been with us way too long. You can tell he's very comfortable. So let's talk about this study that we did back in 2017. Okay. And I got to work with a neurologist from Johns Hopkins. He and I were authors on this with a neuroscientist from University of Michigan. But we did this study of individuals with depression and anxiety, 183 children and adults, okay? And what we worked on was working with the variability of the heart rate variability, okay? And changing that heart rate variability through something called coherence. And we combine that with neurofeedback, which a lot of you do in the Inner Armor Neuro. But we combine those two over 12 weeks with this group of 183 individuals with anxiety and depression. And we had statistically significant changes in anxiety and depression, not through medicine, not through cognitive behavioral therapy, but through working with their heart and through working with their brain. The other thing that happened was any of the individuals who had issues with blood pressure had statistically significant changes in their systolic blood pressure and hypertension just by working on their heart rate variability, not through beta blocker or some medicine, but by working on improving their heart rate variability with something called coherence, okay? And so this is a great study. If you ever want a copy of it, please let us know. But you'll find out the more you look into the heart that the heart does more than pump blood, that the heart is almost like a second brain. And the more that we can work with the heart and optimize it, the more resilient we become over time. So really a cool thing here with how that actually, by working on improving heart rate variability, we actually addressed psychological and emotional issues. So let's look at this one thing, and then I'm going to do explain to you about how heart rate variability works and why we do coherence training with you. Okay, so let me knock this down. And let's pull this up here, okay? Okay, so here is a study of, this is a study of 14,000 people. 14,000 people. This was done with another group, okay? But all they worked on was working with the variability, the inherent variability of the heart and trying to improve that through breathing and coherence over 6 to 9 weeks. They didn't do anything else, okay? They just worked solely on improving the heart rate variability through coherence, okay? Creating a coherent state in the heart. What happened with this group of 14,000 people is they reported an improved state of calmness of 49%, improved sleep of 36%, emotional vitality of 27%, improvement. This isn't a pill. This isn't an exercise program. This isn't, going in and seeing somebody every week. This is just breathing and working with the heart, improve mental and emotional well-being. Then this is the kicker. This is really what we focus on a ton. This is what Tsunami is all about, is decrease in anxiety and depression by 67%, fatigue decreased by 53%, anger decreased by 67%. There's really not an SSRI on the planet. That's a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, which you use for managing anxiety and depression, that can even come close to this, right? And to have that you could just learn and do in 6 to 9 weeks is it's almost a shame that somebody would leave their doctor's office without a prescription for doing breathing and heart rate work, because it can do so much for our emotional resilience and our overall well-being. Well, where did this all come from, this understanding of, how the heart could actually impact our overall resilience and mood and anxiety. Well, back in the 1990s, some cardiologists started looking at something which is a common thing that we've known in mental health for, man, since the 40s probably, is that individuals who have depression have a much higher potential for cardiovascular disorders and problems. That individuals who are depressed, most likely, or have chronic depression, are also going to have comorbid cardiovascular problems. And so the thinking was always that the depression led to that, right? And even a lot of people feel that way, and in some cases it might. But this group of cardiologists started to say, we wonder if, could it be that the cardiovascular issues may contribute to the depression, which is interesting. They kind of like turned it around. And so as people started to look at this, they started to realize that there is this thing that we're going to talk about in a few minutes called coherence, that when it was very low in individuals, their propensity to also develop depression increased significantly. But when it was high, coherence was high in individuals, that they didn't have the same propensity. So they started to look at, could we actually teach people how to have more coherence or balance in the beats of their heart? And in so doing, that was the beginning work of what you're seeing here, where we're now reporting 67% improvement in anxiety and depression just by working on the heart through our breathing. There's a lot we do in academic settings. We work at different universities. We have Chris Casola on with us, who's from Liberty University, where we've been for the last 6 years. And we work in these kiosks. We work at medical schools. We work at Hope College, all these different places, Oklahoma State. And we're working on peak performance. But one of the main reasons we're doing breathing and heart rate is try to help with this anxiety and depression. And it has can have such an improvement on individuals' mental and emotional well-being that we make it part of our performance training. So it's very important for us. Sometimes I say it's kind of, we come in with peak performance as kind of our Trojan horse, but ultimately we're trying to address this issue of anxiety and depression, and heart coherence is the way to do that. So let me talk a little bit. Now let's get into, well, what is heart coherence? And, when I'm doing training, those of you that are doing the resilience side of Inner Armor, what is it that I'm really doing when I'm making this coherence go up? So let's talk a little bit about what coherence is. And in order to do that, we're going to do a little bit of a discussion on heart rate variability. Okay? Guys, hang in with me. As you have questions, feel free to send them, text them in through the chat so that at the end we can answer some questions. I will say that it's always nice to have questions. What's always a real bummer is at the end of a talk when there's no questions, because you're hoping that you answered every question, but you realize you didn't. And so then you wonder, well, how much were people listening if they didn't have any questions? So please send some questions to the chat, because that just helps other people and then helps us understand how well you're kind of understanding what's going on. So if you've seen something like this before, let's pull this up. Okay, that's an EKG, okay? you're hoping that this is what, if I put the leads on you for your heart, that your heart would look like this. What you don't want, right, is you don't want a flat line. Okay, that's when the heart stops working. I think somebody said earlier, the heart's a muscle, and there is electrical current that makes that muscle work, right? And when you look at an EKG, you're looking at that electrical current. We also do the same thing in EEG when you're doing neurofeedback. We're looking at the electrical current. But there's something interesting as you're looking at this. You see these beats that happen, okay, these kind of inflections that happen. Is there something about that you find interesting? If you look at the first section of beat compared to the second section of beat. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to look at this section here, and then look at this section here. What do you notice about that? Send me something in the chat, or you can say something. And and also here we got this section here. Okay, what do you notice about those based on our previous discussion about what the heart does? And
Well, the beats aren't going as erratic. I mean, they're going slower as you go.
yes. Okay, so you see that they're different, right? Somebody said, what did this person say here?
They're not the
They
frequency.
vary. Yeah, they're smooth and choppier, Claudia. Yeah, but you see the variability in that. So this is really important to understand about your heart. Okay, is that every beat is not the same. They differ. So there's a span that is changing between beats. You see that first beat? And if we run it again, let's run it again. Okay, do you see that the distance isn't always the same, right? They're changing. And that is what's intrinsic within the heart, is this variability, this distance. And that's what allows it to be flexible, is the more of this variability that your heart displays as it's beating, the more flexibility it has, which seems kind of weird, right? Like, you mean the more this varies, it's inconsistent, the stronger I am? Yes, absolutely. And that's what's important. So let's take these numbers, okay? Let's take two people. We'll just take a random name that nobody's ever heard of. Adi, okay? So we'll take Adi, and then we'll take Tim.
Amy.
We're going to take Tim. Okay. So both Adi and Tim, we're going to say have a pulse, a heart rate of 60. Okay. So what we're used to hearing, your pulse is 60. We wear our Fitbit and it says your heart rate average while you were sleeping was 62, right? You go to the doctor's office, the nurse checks your, pulse and says, "Oh, that's a good pulse. That's a 58, right?" Or, "Man, your pulse is going pretty fast. It's 110, right?" And we kind of lock in on that. Like for Adi and Tim, they both say 60. We're both 60. Now, all that's telling you is that over the average of 1 minute, that your heart had those 60 beats, okay? That average for the minute, it had 60 beats. But what happens if Adi's beats are happening if it's going along, and I'm going to draw this out. His are every second, like a metronome, he's beating. And so he does 60 of those. But Tim comes along and he has one distance that looks like that, another distance that looks like that, one that looks like that, one that's shorter, one that's longer, shorter, and there ends up being the same number of beats, 60, but the space between the beats are different. Who do you think has more resilience and whose heart is actually going to work longer? Tim or Adi's? Put it in the chat. Tim or Adi's? Who's got more resilience and has a stronger heart? The one that's beating on the second, like a metronome, like a clock, or the one that has all this variability in it? Put it in the chat. Let's see what we've got.
Does it have to do with calmness?
No, nope, it does not have to. Okay, and I'll explain what it has to do with there. Okay, so Ian says Tim, Jordan says Tim. Those are two of our employees. So either they live to keep their job tomorrow or they're gone. No, I'm joking. No, of course they got it right. It's Tim, which, you know, intuitively, when I first kind of got into this work, I'm like, man, that seems weird. You know, like, why do I want all that variability? But think about it this way, is all of a sudden I'm going to come along and I'm going to introduce stress. Okay. So stress comes along in some form or, you know, let's say these two play ping pong against each other. Okay. And stress comes in. Okay. The one who's going to be able to handle the stress the better of the two is the one who has this innate variability within the heart. So in really good athletes who recover really, really well, they have massive variability between these beats. Okay. So what you'll find is this, I can add the same stress into both of these people, but the one with more variability is going to recover quicker and it's going to turn that stress more into something that strengthens them versus the other one, it's actually going to be something that's taxing on the heart. Okay. And there's different metrics that you can do to give yourself an HRV or a heart rate variability number. Okay. Like, you know, Tim might have a number that equals 80 and Adi might have one that's 30. Okay. But that variability number, the higher that number is, the stronger it is. One of the highest recorded variabilities that we're aware of is actually was Lance Armstrong. Now, whether that came through doping or what, but he had such variability that he had some beats that over the 60 seconds that if you span them out would have been 90, and he had some beats that would have been 30, giving him an average of 60. But he had such high variability that what he was known for is when he climbed mountains on his bike, that he'd be head to head with somebody and then he would just keep going and going and they would be falling off. Well, with that higher variability, you were adding the same amount of stress, but his heart was able to expand into these reaches because of this variability. Okay. So we want more variability. Let's go ahead and we're going to add two more things and then we'll be done with this, but I want to explain how our program helps with this. Okay. So let me stop that and let's go here. And okay. So When you typically look at these variabilities, I'm going to look at them like stair steps. Okay, so they're going to be longer variability, and then they're going to stair step up longer, and then they're going to gradually get shorter, 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 shorter. Then they're going to come down, and the stair steps or the beats are going to get longer. Okay. Now, typically, in what we're trying to do with coherence, so coherence is there a way that I can make this side of the fast beats equal this side of the slow beats? Okay. Now, what causes the heart to go into those faster beats and those slower beats? It's all about oxygen. Okay. So I'm breathing in and out. I'm breathing in and out. And when I'm out of oxygen, so I exhale, exhale, I'm out of oxygen. Boom. What do you think my heart's going to do at the bottom of my exhale? No more oxygen. What do you think the heart's going to do? Do you think it's going to beat faster or slower when it's out of oxygen? Give me an answer.
Pump harder, right?
What's that?
It's going to pump harder.
Absolutely, because all of a sudden the life-giving oxygen is gone. That's in a breath. I exhaled. My heart does not know that I'm going to give it more oxygen. So it's going to prep, just like when it heard the alarm, saw the lion, it's going to prep by saying, I don't know if he's choking or if the oxygen supply is gone. So I better start working faster. So what happens is these slower beats start speeding up and get faster and faster. Okay. Now, the average of these beats, like we talked about earlier, might be 60. But based on variability, this top beat might be 85 and this bottom beat might be 45. Okay. So I'm out of oxygen, but then I inhale. And now I've got oxygen. What do you think the heart's going to do? Do you think it's going to beat faster or slower as it gets oxygen? So I breathe in. Now I've got all the oxygen, and then I breathe out. At this top of this breath, what do you think is going to happen to the heart? You think it's going to speed up or slow down? Somebody's got to
Slow down.
It's going to slow down because I gave it what it needed. So now it's going to relax and the beats are going to get longer. Okay. You guys, this is happening every time you breathe. How many times do you think you've taken a breath your entire life? It's just crazy to think about this. And the heart isn't just beating like a metronome or like a clock. It's in time with your oxygen because it needs that oxygen to get into the blood system to keep you alive. When we talk about oxygen saturation in your blood, that is how much oxygen I'm getting in to keep the oxygen saturation at 90% or 98% or higher. If it goes below 94%, cells start dying. At 88%, you qualify to wear a nasal cannula and get supplemental oxygen because you'll die over time, right? When you've seen people who need to use oxygen, it's because they're not getting enough oxygen in and the blood's not getting saturated enough. And if you remember back during COVID, we were doing a lot of oxygen saturations, okay? And that was because oxygen is so important to how the heart works, and the heart is trying to keep it saturated, the blood saturated with all this oxygen. So it is variably like the machine that was said earlier. It's like this machine that's adapting almost like a thermostat to whatever the oxygen's doing. Okay. And it moves and alters that. Okay. So in the study that we did, and the 14,000 people where they improved their overall anxiety and depression, what was happening there was creating a balance between all the upbeats and the downbeats so that they would equal each other. Stress is going to happen. Your heart is going to experience stress because you're going to be without oxygen. But then the heart is going to recover when you give it oxygen. And then it's going to be stressed again. And you're going to give it oxygen. And now it's going to recover again. And if you can balance that out, so take the variabilities that are happening and you start to make them balanced up and down so the two equal each other. This is called sympathetic or fast or stressed. This is called parasympathetic or rest and recovery. And we want to create it balanced. Well, when that gets balanced, the more balanced that gets, that's what we call coherence. Super important. Coherence is the balancing of the two. Now, most of us aren't spending time thinking about our breathing. So what happens is these things get out of kilter. Okay. And as they get out of kilter, then our body loses its resilience and our coherence drops. Okay. Now, what's really cool, and we'll kind of finish up with this, is your heart is doing all this unconscious adaptation, right? But you've been given this miraculous thing of breathing that can literally control the upbeats and the downbeats of those variable beats and even it out. Inside of you, you have this ability. There's not a drug that does that. There's the ability to control the flow of oxygen so that we can create this coherence. So if I was to take, let's draw this here, okay? So normally, let's say somebody's breathing in, and then they're breathing out. They're breathing in, out, breathing in, out. Maybe they're deciding to hold their breath a little bit, breathe in and out, and then breathe in, out. This is how the average person breathes, okay? And the average person breathes around 12 breaths, 13 breaths a minute with a consistency of breath of about 2.5 or 3, okay? So that is what the average kind of oxygen flow into the heart is. So then what happens is, I want you to imagine it this way. Use your imagination here. Let's see this thing as a tube, okay? So I'm going to connect the tops of the breaths, okay, like this. And imagine this is a tube, okay? Here's one end of the tube. Here's the other end of the tube. And here's I'm going to connect the bottom ends of the breath, okay? So imagine that's three-dimensional, that's a tube. What would you say about that if that was going to your engine and that was your gas line? If that was fuel going down that tube to your engine, okay, can you kind of see that? Because it's going down there, that's the supply. What would you say about that fuel line? Is that a good, consistent fuel line? No, it's got all these kinks in it. And so at the end, my engine in my car, if that was gas, wouldn't function very well because the fuel line isn't good. Our fuel line is our breathing. And when our breathing looks like this, do you know what our heart does? Is our heart works harder because we're not controlling the variability. When we breathe this way, think about this. When we breathe this way, up, down, very consistent. Okay. At 6 breaths a minute. Why it works that way, I have no idea. But it's something about this. I mean, there's somebody out there that knows that, but I don't. Why is it so perfect? It was like this gift given to us that if you take the time to breathe and you make it consistent and you focus on it at 6 breaths a minute, look what it does to my fuel line. Imagine the same thing again. Bottom, top, see it kind of three-dimensionally. The oxygen is flowing through, right? And it's flowing through evenly. And that evenness starts to create the upbeats and the downbeats and that coherence. And it's the coherence that changes lives. So why do we focus so much on your 8 minutes today of breathing? And if you're not doing the Resilient program, this is something that we do in Resilience that we'd love for you to keep working on, which is this breathing, is to create this fuel line so we can create more coherence, which makes us more resilient. Good breathing like this for 4 minutes can last up to 3 hours on your nervous system, creating more of a calm, steady state. Okay, I've run out of time. Hopefully you learned some things. Any questions? I asked you guys to do some questions for me. So let's see how we did on the questions. Let me see. Any questions? Do I have any questions in there? How long would I need to train to see results? Okay. So I have seen, this is very interesting because we're doing a project, or we're talking about this project at Oklahoma State and looking at resilience. And they were actually asking us within one session, could you see changes? And we're saying, no. But then I started thinking, yes, we do see changes. Actually, they were saying any type of change, not 50%, but could you see 5%, 10%? We said, yeah, you actually see that by just teaching somebody how to breathe. And so they're just by changing your breath, you will see instantaneous changes in your coherence. But we want you to be able to hold your coherence up into the 90s, where we can balance this way over and over and over again. And that's going to take about 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks of some pretty good diaphragmatic breathing if you're a moderately healthy person to be able to do that. Good question. Any other questions about today? Okay. Well, it was delightful to have all of you on. What a wonderful group. The take home is breathe. Take the time to breathe. It doesn't cost you anything. Okay. And it's really the most precious gift you have. If I took it away from you for about 4 minutes, you'd probably give up everything you have just for one more breath, right? So it is one of those things that we take for granted, but if we manage it well, it can do wonders for our heart, for our brain, for our immune system, for our sleep, and the list goes on and on. Okay. Great. I see all the stuff. Thank you guys for attending, and we'll see you next month. Okay? Great.
Thank you, Doc.
Yep.
Thank you.
See you guys. Yep. Bye-bye.